6 o'clock, and I'll call the meeting to order, and the first item of business is adoption of the agenda. I have moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that the agenda be adopted as amended. Is there any discussion? Everybody noted that it was amended? We're good. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Not seeing any. Minutes. Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the minutes from the March 6th, 2024 council meeting be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues to those minutes? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we have 4 timed items tonight: a minor variance, 2 zone changes at 6, and a drainage quarter revision at 6:20. So we'll go straight to the public meeting for the minor variance. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that the council meeting be adjourned at 6:01 p.m. for the purposes of holding a public meeting pursuant to the provisions of the Planning Act. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And minor variance application AO3-24. Spencer, I will turn it over to you for the presentation of your report.
Thank you. Good evening to council, staff, and members of the public joining us here tonight. The first application for minor variance before the committee is AO3-24, and it affects lands on 15th line. In this particular instance, the applicants have applied for relief from 2 different sections of the township zoning bylaw. One as it relates to the maximum gross floor area permitted for accessory residential units, and the second relating to the distance between the primary residence and the additional residential unit. The applicants have recently constructed a shop on the subject property, and within the shop they're planning to establish an ARU. The primary area of concern for them was the limitation to the gross floor area. The ARU is proposed at around 1,500 square feet, and based on the provisions, committee will recall that they're capped at either 1,507 square feet in the agricultural area or 50% of the gross floor area of the existing dwelling, whichever the lesser. So in this particular case, while they do comply with the 1,507, they're having a challenge based on the 50% of the existing gross floor area of the house. Relative to the distance between the primary dwelling and the ARU, staff are supportive of the location that the applicant has advised they'd like to construct the ARU. As within an existing shop, it shares an existing laneway, the services are there, and there's no real issue with as far as taking agricultural land out of production, as the footprint already exists for the structure. As a result of circulation, there was no agency comments received, either supportive of or against the application. Similarly, staff had no concerns from a public works standpoint or a building standpoint. We are supportive of the application here tonight, and I would advise that the owners are also in attendance should the committee have any questions for them.
Thanks, Spencer. Any questions from the committee for the planner on the report? Not seeing any. Does the applicant wish to speak to their application? All right. Are there any members of the public, either here or online, who wish to speak to the application? Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the Township of Zorra Committee of Adjustment approve application file AO3-24 submitted by Kenneth and Sandra Wilms for lands described as Part Lot 21, Concession 3, North Oxford, in the Township of Zorra, municipally known as 154598, 15th line, as it relates to 1. Relief from Table 5.4.2.4, provisions for detached additional residential units. 2. Increase the maximum permitted distance between dwellings from 30 meters, 98.6 feet, to 75 meters, 264 feet. 2. Relief from Table 5.4.2.3, provisions for all additional residential units. 2. Increase the maximum permitted cumulative gross floor area from 50% of the gross floor area of the existing dwelling to 65% of the gross floor area, to facilitate the establishment of a detached additional residential unit on a property zoned General Agricultural Zone A2 in the Township of Zorra. Does anybody wish to speak to that motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So, before you proceed, just touch base with Mike Hughes, who you probably know already. And he'll make sure that you're on the right side of all your dotting of I's and crossing of T's before you go ahead and break ground or anything like that, okay? All right. And then I have moved, Spencer, zone change applications at N5-24-01.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The application for zone change before council at this time is at M5-2401. Affects lands owned by Cote Enterprises, Inc. And I would highlight a few things for council. First of which, this is a parcel which was recently subject to applications for consent last year by the Land Division Committee, through which they created 3 different agribusiness parcels on the subject land. The parcel outlined in blue on the plate before council is the parcel that is seeking the zone change tonight. And with respect to what their ask is, they are maintaining an agribusiness use. However, it's not one that's specifically identified within our agribusiness zone. Internal discussions with staff and the chief building official did indicate support of what the applicant's request is. And what they do, for council's information, is they manufacture agricultural storage tanks for fertilizer and other chemicals. And so what they're proposing on the subject lands outlined in blue is to establish an approximate 30,000 square foot warehouse where they would manufacture these tanks, and they would also store the tanks laid horizontally on the site. It's indicated on plate 3, sort of the general layout as far as the tanks themselves, where they would be stored once they come out of the manufacturing facility. The area of the subject lands, it would be approximately 7.35 acres in total, access being through a shared driveway which services all 3 of the lots. And what had happened in this particular instance is the area identified as Part 1 was previously signed for a custom cart and trailer business. However, in discussions through with the interested purchaser of Part 4, came to light that they did require some additional lands for the manufacturing facility. And as such, the applicants have actually applied for both an application for consent to facilitate the boundary adjustment between the 2 parcels, and the zone change to actually explicitly indicate that agricultural storage tanks would be a permitted use. The manufacturing of them would be a permitted use within the agribusiness zone. As a result of circulation, we did not receive any comments from members of the public or agencies. We are supportive of the application here tonight, and I would just highlight for council that the corresponding bylaw will take some time before it's brought forward, as it needs to coincide with the approval of the associated consent to make sure that that parcel actually merges with what's currently shown as Part 4, and then the whole of that, being 7.35 acres, is rezoned into the AB special to reflect the requested permitted use. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I would note that the agent for this particular property is in attendance tonight as well.
Thanks, Spencer. Any questions for the planner on the report? Does the applicant wish to speak to their application? I've got to just get you to go to the microphone, sorry. Just so those on YouTube can...
Good evening, Council. Scott Patterson, Patterson Planning Consultants, here on behalf of the property owner. Just here in full support of the staff report and recommendation this evening, and happy to answer any questions from Council that may come up, or from the public if there's anyone here as well.
I'm Randy Barber. I have the property directly south, and I don't have a problem with what you're doing or anything else. There's just been a few concerns that some of the neighbors brought up that actually don't touch the property, wanted me to bring up. One is when you guys are doing your deal up there, that the trucks that you have to be delivered, delivering stuff to your facility, can they be routed up County Road 6 and down number 2? They don't want them going through Beachville itself. They had a real problem with the railroad tracks. They had to get the MP involved to fix those tracks. It took a couple of years, and they're all concerned that you know, the truck traffic would not do well with the tracks, let alone the noise coming up the hill and everything else. That's the first thing. The other thing was, for me, I have a fence there, and I have a few animals, so I just want to make sure that fence is protected. Mike's assured me that it will be, but I just wanted to make sure that, you know, the fence is looked after so that I don't get a phone call in Montreal and that my donkeys are wandering around on number 2 highway. And somebody brought up something down in the village itself about noise. So when they found out it was going to be a tank manufacturing with steel, they were concerned about decibel levels. That's beyond me, but they brought that up too. But again, nobody's saying no. Just those few things, especially the truck traffic, because I drive truck and I've been there for over 40 years, and I just don't want the neighbors throwing stones at me. You know what I mean? And I come in that way as well. I come on County Road 6 and come down number 2 to keep the neighborhood happy. So that's about it. Just a few requests, not anything that I'm opposed.
I'll speak a little bit to each one of those, just for some clarity, really, not that I can necessarily address them, but just for understanding for anybody here on this application. With respect to traffic, we don't have, the township doesn't have the ability to regulate how people, you know, you or I or this property owner comes and goes from their property. Once they're on the road, they're on the road, notwithstanding, you know, full load or half load seasons and things like that. So that would really be up to, you know, the applicant in this case and neighbors if they want to talk about that and do something, but legally we don't have the ability to enforce a route from that property.
But again, the reason I said it was I understand what you're saying. It's just to let him know
Yep.
that there may be some opposition
Yep.
down the road, and it might get, you know, nasty. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that for them, him, or anybody.
With respect to the fence is your fence, you said?
Yes.
And it's on your property?
It is.
So, I mean, the township has fencing bylaws, and,
Yeah.
you know, there's no reason that this should be affected by this, as long as the fence should be affected by this, as long as it's on your side of the property, it's your
Yep.
fence, you know, so.
Okay.
And with respect to noise, the township has a noise bylaw. Anybody with property in the township has to comply with that noise bylaw, regardless of a planning application of different uses and things like that, so they're gonna have to comply with that. That being said, as long as they're in compliance with that noise bylaw, if it makes, you know, more noise than the current use does,
Yeah.
that's not wrong.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. No. And again, not opposed.
Yeah.
Just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's what the meeting's for.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else, either here or online, wants to speak to the application? Okay. And then we're going to, just so you know, I think you know how this goes, we're going to do the next zone change, then we come out of the public meeting. Okay. So then we are going to go on then, Spencer, to zone change application ZN 5-24-03.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The application for zone change ZN 5-2403 affects Meadham's Meat Market in Embro, specifically within the village core of Embro. In this particular instance, the applicant's property is identified as legal nonconforming. It has been there for a number of years, predating the township zoning bylaw. At this time, they're seeking the zone change to allow them to provide a significant expansion to the existing business. Being legal nonconforming, the village zone itself does not actually identify an abattoir, a slaughterhouse of any kind, or a butcher shop as permitted uses. However, the continuation of that legal nonconforming use itself is permitted, and the township and county staff have no issue with the continuation nor the expansion of that use at this location. The couple of items I would highlight that the report addresses are related to parking in particular and the minimum required landscape open space. Council will note throughout the report that a number of deficiencies are noted. So, for example, the property itself does not really achieve any kind of rear yard setback, nor do they achieve any interior side yard setback. However, those are viewed as existing conditions. The continuation of those existing conditions and the expansion onto them is not viewed as problematic in this instance. Staff do feel there is an opportunity at this point to look at some alternative designs whereby they would be able to incorporate more than the 4 parking spaces that they're currently showing on the preliminary site plan. To be clear, the applicants have shown 4 parking spaces, including 1 loading space and an accessible space at the southern part of that drawing before council. There were questions internally from Public Works staff and otherwise as far as just how the truck delivering animals to the site would navigate the site post-expansion. So if you look at this relative to, I know council is very familiar with the area, relative to the food market to the south, it actually would jut out closer towards number 6 than that current business does. And this parking is not specifically delineated for each of those users. They do tend to park and go between the different users, whether it's Meetamas or the food market or otherwise. We do feel that going from 11, which would be the required parking spaces based on the addition alone, so to be clear, that excludes the parking that would be required for the overall business. The 11 is only based on the addition, the size of the addition at being just under 5,000 square feet. It would actually be 22 spaces total. And staff are supportive of reduced parking throughout the village, and in many situations, we do, however, feel there's an opportunity to provide more than the 4 spaces, and further to provide some additional clarification as to how the truck delivering the animals navigates the site. Similarly, the applicant did provide some justification using the rationale that their employees walk to work, so they don't rely themselves on a parking space. And while that's understood, situations do change, and from a land use perspective, we can't rely on the fact that the employees will always be able to walk from where they live to this place of work. So with that in mind, we do think that an alternative design could better accommodate some additional parking, whether that's through a reduced depth of the proposed addition or otherwise. We leave that to the applicant to come up with. The other area I would highlight that the report touches on is that of minimum landscape open space. Planning staff do feel there's an opportunity to provide more than the 0.98% landscape open space that the applicant is proposing. 10% is the requirement per the zoning bylaw in the village zone. We do feel, again, through an alternative design, there's an opportunity here to provide some additional landscape open space. Within the context of the village core itself, this is an area, it's an entrance or an exit, depending which way you're coming or going into the village, and we do feel that there should be some thought and consideration given to providing some sort of landscape open space features on the property. That could also help with drainage as well. It's not exclusive in that it has to be trees necessarily. It could be something such as a rain garden or otherwise. For those reasons, we are asking that the application be deferred tonight, just to give the applicant an opportunity to consider alternative designs and consider an opportunity to allow for additional parking and look at the minimum landscape open space. With respect to the other provisions that the applicant is deficient on and will become more deficient on, such as lot coverage, interior side yard, and rear yard, and more importantly, use, staff are satisfied with all of those things, the continuation of them, and the expansion of the business at this location. I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have, and I would note that the applicant and the owner are both in attendance as well to address any questions.
Thanks, Spencer. Questions from council on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
Spencer, 4 is not enough. Did I hear you say you were looking for an additional 4 to make 8, which would still be less than the 11 or the 20, which would be the standard?
Through the mayor, to Councillor Mitchell's question, planning staff did not recommend a number. We just recommended that 4 is not sufficient based on the size of the building and the intended use, and the fact that it relies heavily currently on staff walking to work. We don't think that's a reasonable assumption moving forward. Is 8 appropriate? Maybe. We haven't provided a number, just to suggest that 11 is what would be required based on the township zoning bylaw. However, staff are supportive of reducing parking requirements within the village core and elsewhere throughout our villages and other communities. in an effort to allow for development and look at other opportunities to expand businesses and otherwise. We would just like to see some more thought and consideration given to the parking that has been shown on the sketch. And similar, I want to stress the importance too of better demonstrating how the truck delivering the animals actually navigates the site and goes to and from this site as it's making its deliveries.
Thanks, Spencer.
Anyone else? Questions on the report? Does the applicant wish to speak to their application? Yeah, if you just go to the microphone, state your name.
Good evening, all. Through you, Mr. Mayor, and councilors, I appreciate the time today given to allow me to speak towards this file. As the applicant of the file, I'm here today to advocate for the support of the application as it was submitted. As you have seen a detailed report in front of you on behalf of the county, I'd like to thank the county's involvement in the process and commend them on their involvement thus far. Really, the lack of comments or concerns from any of the county's agencies was well received and goes to show the viability and strength of the application proposed. Really, only 2 items, as Spencer indicated, was pitched as a potential concern, as noted near the last few paragraphs of his report. We are in the position that the application should be accepted as is based on the following considerations. The decision to move animal unloading indoors significantly enhances the safety measures within the plant. By containing animals within the facility, the risk of accidents or incidents during the unloading is minimized. This not only ensures the safety of the employees, but also contributes to the overall efficiency of operations by streamlining the process and reducing potential disruptions caused by external factors, such as animal behavior. So you could see right now at the current design there, you'll see that there's a building that's in a dashed line, and right now it's required for the vehicles to kind of come around there and load at the back. So all we have simply done to answer the question about how is traffic going to change from what's there now, it's not. The only difference is when the vehicle parks, it'll be indoor rather than outdoors. So really that will have no impact on the overall site from a loading or unloading perspective. The availability of public parking in the village of Embro provides a viable alternative for visitors or employees who may require additional parking space beyond what is proposed on site. Considering that the existing public parking is rarely utilized, it suggests that the current parking provisions on site are sufficient to meet the needs of the business. Moreover, promoting the use of public parking can contribute to the broader goal of reducing traffic congestion and promoting sustainable transportation practices within the community. It's also important to note that the rear of the property is owned within the family, and they have the ability to park 10 vehicles there as it is. So a lot of the, being a local business, they do a lot of, it's not a lot of staff, and I'm sure they'll speak to that a little bit more after. It's a minimal amount of staff. It's mainly a bit of retail, a few customers in at the same time on occasion. As County mentioned, some of the parking is shared between the village grocery mart there, so they're kind of going back and forth. So it's never been an issue. And to revise the site, there's really not a whole lot of opportunity to improve the parking. So if you see again that current building that's there on the northern end of the property, it really reduces the potential for a better parking. You couldn't angle in and achieve more parking spots. You can't do front to back. There's not enough depth. So really the limitation to the site is the width of the site in regards to parking. So even by shortening the building slightly, could not improve the parking as it is. And then thirdly, the reduction of landscaped open space aligns with the recommendations from OMAFRA regarding abattoirs, given the emphasis on minimizing potential contamination risks. It is prudent to adhere to such guidelines, being an abattoir. In the event that green spaces are close to them, they actually want you to remove them to reduce any potential contamination. It's also important to note that this morning we received the official approval from OMAFRA on our current proposal. So they have the blessing to continue with, subject to our approval here. They have OMAFRA's approval already. So in light of these factors, it can be argued that the county's concerns regarding parking and landscaped open space may be addressed adequately with this proposal. The decision to defer the zone change application should be reconsidered, recognizing these are practical considerations, and we have demonstrated how we can continue to run this business safely and efficiently. In conclusion, supporting Medium as Meats, a proposed addition is not only beneficial for the business itself, but also for the community at large. By modernizing their plant and adhering to regulatory standards, Medium Meats can continue to provide high quality, locally sourced meat products, and thereby contributing to the economic growth and sustainability of the community. And I'm happy to answer any questions that staff or public may have. Thank you.
Thanks. Questions for the applicant? Councilor Mitchell.
Yeah, 3 questions. First of all, the addition, is it entirely the abattoir part of it, or is part of the addition the retail part of the
We're actually not really increasing much of the retail space. We are relocating it, so we're bringing it further ahead, but the space that was retail is being revamped into more of a processing. So it's mainly just to the plant is old, so it's just to give a bit more space within the plant from a working perspective.
Okay. How many days a week do they kill? Would they be animals being delivered?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, 2? Or maybe Brent can join me for some of these questions, if that's okay.
Thank you. We slaughter Monday afternoons and Tuesday mornings.
Okay, so animals are coming in 2 days a week?
Generally, they all come in on Monday, the odd time Tuesday morning, not very often.
Okay. And an associated question is, how much of your business is custom killing as opposed to retail sales?
It fluctuates over the years. I'd say 50-50, but some years it's 70-30. It goes up and down over the years.
And custom killing would require probably less parking for customers than retail, or is that kind of a stretch?
It doesn't really make a difference.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? Deputy Mayor Grigg.
So the planner spoke about the delivery plans and exactly where that traffic was going to go. So you just spoke to the offloading is now going to be inside, so where those lanes are. Was any of that information provided to planner? Like, has county planning been able to assess? I'm not sure if that question maybe should be for planning. If the scenario that you just demonstrated there, like, do we have anything that outlines that, or is there any analysis of that, what the applicant just described?
Through the mayor, the information provided was really focused on the reduced parking for customers and employees. There's very little focus on the loading space. Actually, it's news to me as far as how the truck does navigate the site currently, but I would have concerns. I think planning staff would have concerns if it utilizes an adjacent property for delivery purposes. If I'm understanding the owner's agent properly, they actually use the neighboring property to load or unload. I would like clarification on that, if they're not entirely containing their operation on their individual property.
We can clarify that through you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry if I caused any confusion. The entire unloading and loading of the facility is done off of Highway 6. The only difference with our proposed plan compared to the current is the unloading and loading will be done in the facility now rather than outside of the facility. What I had spoke to earlier about parking in the family behind, directly behind, is a house that can accommodate a few employees. So there is some parking there, but nothing in regards to loading or unloading. That practice will remain exactly the same today.
So just to clarify, though, the additional spaces you're talking about are not on this property, though?
That's correct.
On an adjacent property?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions for the applicant? Thanks. Are there any members of the public here or online who wish to speak to the application? All right. Then, moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that pursuant to the Planning Act, the public meeting be adjourned at 6:30 p.m. and the regular meeting of council be called back to order. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And the first zone change application, moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the council of the Township of Zorra approve in principle the zone change application submitted by Patterson Planning Consultants, CO Scott Patterson, whereby the lands described as Part Lot 21, Concession 1, North Oxford, Township of Zorra, to amend the existing AB special zone to include an agricultural storage tank manufacturer and accessory uses as a permitted use. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So, same thing again, follow up with Mike and or Spencer, make sure you're on the right side of dotting your i's, crossing your t's before you proceed with any construction, and you're good to go. And the second zone change application then, moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that the council of the Township of Zorra defer the zone change application submitted by Everest Estate Homes, CO Nathan Koch, until such time as sufficient justification is provided with respect to the proposed reduced parking and minimum landscaped open space requirements. Is there any discussion? Councilor Mitchell.
Yeah, I support defer. First of all, it's great to see a local business expanding and growing their business. Unfortunately, they're in a very limited space to do so. My concern is 4 retail parking spaces, regardless of what parking spaces available for current or future employees, when the standard is 11 for the additional loan and up to 20 total, I believe the Spencer said. If there's only 4 parking spaces for customers and 30 to 50% of the business is retail sales, the concern is that people will be parking in other places, other businesses, most specifically the grocery store next door. So I think it's prudent to take another look at what's possible here and whether there is some other way to deal with the parking situation. Not as much concerned with the green space in this situation, but I think the parking, if we were to approve just 4 without more explanation, could be problematic for other businesses in the area.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Greg.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with Paul on this. I think it's a good news story for a local business to be expanding, and the restrictions of the pre-existing condition of that property really makes it difficult. To be clear, I'm definitely, as our planner indicated, there is space for reduction, but the scope of this reduction is significant, and an opportunity to consider some alternative designs. The other piece that really is sticking as a challenge for me is sort of that demonstration. It's outlined in the report, and it's discussed by staff, the demonstration of how deliveries are to be made. So I'm feeling like there's probably some good setup for how this can function, but until that is clarified and staff have an opportunity to review that, I'm not comfortable supporting approval of this now. I think when we have applications that come forward that are way off base from what our policies outline as good development, the recommendation is to not approve. And I think the recommendation of deferral here is a great example of where this is a almost functioning, almost support-worthy application, but may need some additional work. You know, the current, our job in these policies and in these decisions is not to just think about what can function for today or the next 5 years, but how this can function into the future. You guys are living some of that now. The decisions of the past informing that property has led to the restrictions that now you guys are facing. And so while we can't change that, we've inherited those things, we need to now think about how the decisions we make on those land uses are going to impact into the future. And I love that staff are living locally and working locally and walking, and I love that there's family that lives behind, but none of those things are guarantees. And so unfortunately, those weigh in for myself in considering what those parking requirements are.
Anyone else? Councillor Finch.
I'm happy to support the deferral. I would like, as for Paul and Katie both mentioned, but I am happy to see this come back soon and keep this ball moving forward.
Yeah, I'll support the deferral. I think there's realities of this property, you know, that have been mentioned already. So, I mean, it's not going to come back at 11 parking spaces. Like, and frankly, I'm fine with that. But I think there's been enough questions raised today about, you know, can we see maybe more clearly in a map, like exactly how the loading, unloading is going to happen? You know, is 5 spots, you know, achievable? I think some clarity. So I think a deferral, you know, notwithstanding that I know a deferral for someone who wants to build something is always a, you know, I feel that. But I think as the Deputy Mayor said, if we can take another crack at this and get it as right as we can get it, there's only one chance at doing these things. And if that downtown is going to be, you know, revitalized by businesses like this, we got to make sure that not only that it's done, but that it's done the best that we can do it. And that's going to be an example to every other business then, existing or new, that's going to come. So I think a deferral to take another crack at it is the right thing to do at this time. You know, even though I'm not terribly keen about the delay, but I think it's the right thing to do. Anyone else before I call the question? Deputy Mayor Greg.
Sorry, just really briefly, the information from the applicant in relation to green space and contamination risk in OMAFRA, I would even be interested in, you know, having that conversation through the planning lens to see if there's some sort of, you know, we each have our own backgrounds of information and what's informing our position on something, but I would want to hear through planning if there are things that could function or what those setbacks could be. We've had some really great meetings and conversations in Embro around some downtown revitalization and some great projects that may or may not be able to happen. So when we're looking at, you know, a 10% requirement and having that at 1, and what I'm hearing is, you know, if you're saying 1, but 1 is also not permitted, what's that going to look like? So even having a little bit of a closer look at that, I fully expect a reduction, but if there's something that can meet the requirements of both sides and also enhance the downtown core of Embro, I think that could be really positive.
Anyone else? Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that the Council of the Township of Zorra defer the zone change application submitted by Everest Estate Homes, care of Nathan Cock, until such time as sufficient justification is provided with respect to the proposed reduced parking and minimum landscaped open space requirements. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So deferral means basically go back, talk with the planner again, and we'll see you again whenever you're ready to come back with your application, whatever that looks like. And, you know, that's the direction that we've given to our staff, okay? All right. And then we have quarter of revision. By the way, everybody's here for planning is, you know, you're obviously free to stay and listen to the riveting council meeting, but you're also free to go entirely if you want. Quarter of revision, moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the following members be appointed to sit as the Court of Revision for the J.B. Murray Drain, and the first member being the Chair of the Court of Revision 2023. 1, Chairperson Marcus Ryan. 2, Crystal Finch. 3, Paul Mitchell. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Now you get to take a break. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that the Court of Revision of J.B. Murray Drain 2023 does now open at 6:39 p.m. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And is there anybody here in attendance for this quarter revision? Can you identify yourself for the record? Anybody else here for this quarter revision? Okay. No written appeals received for this, correct? Okay. Comments from engineering drainage superintendent, Mike, whichever order you want to go in.
No, nothing at this time. I don't think we've received any complaints or anything, so I think we're good to move forward.
Questions from the committee, the court, sorry? Not seeing any. No appeals, so there's no appellate question. Decision of court revision by resolution. Everybody's good? Not seeing anybody waving at me. Okay. Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell. Whereas the Council of the Township of Zorra provisionally adopted the report of Spreet Associates Engineers and Architects dated December 21st, 2023 for the drainage works known as the J.B. Murray Drain 2023 on February 1st, 2024. And whereas there have been no appeals that lands have been assessed too high or too low, nor that any road or lands have not been addressed, or that due consideration has not been given as to type or land use. Now, therefore, the Court of Revision for the J.B. Murray Drain 2023 hereby confirms the assessment schedule as fixed by the engineer. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thanks, Mike. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that the Court of Revision for the J.B. Murray Drain 2023 does now close and council reconvenes at 6:41 p.m. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And then we are down to 8, reports from Public Services Department, and nothing from Roads Division, as we now call it. But 8.2, Recreation and Facilities Division, Report 2024-031 from the Manager of Recreation and Facilities regarding Embro Pavilion construction. Sophia, is there anything you want to highlight for council before I ask them for questions?
No, I'm open for questions.
Questions from council on the report? Councilor Mitchell.
Yes, Sophia, the original $194,000 budget that was presented back in December of 2021 included $15,000 for electrical and water connection. I see with the update information we're at $179,000 for the building and the concrete work. There's a line in there about the electrical and plumbing may not be included at this time. So if you can clarify, we're up to almost 180,000. I presume that the electrical and plumbing is going to be 2 years later, well over the 15,000 original. So this is going to go past the 194. What's the plan at this point? Whether is the electrical and plumbing going to be removed permanently? Is it going to be delayed a year? Is there potential that more money will be raised to include it this year when it's all being done? Just where are we at on that part of the project?
Yeah, so the quotes in the original proposal to council are quite outdated to the quotes we're receiving now. So after reviewing the quotes for our additional services, excavation, concrete, plumbing, and water, it was quite clear that we couldn't meet all of those additional services within the project budget. Excavation and concrete are obviously pretty critical to the project completion itself and installation of the structures. So, but electrical and plumbing are nice to haves, and so we recommend that that we rough in for those services so they can still be easily installed at a future time. And after this meeting, our plan will be to go back to the committee and have discussions around options to fundraise for these 2 additional services in the future. But at this time, within the project budget, we won't be able to complete all 4 additional services. That answered it.
Yeah, thanks for that response. It clarifies the situation. And the way the motion was written, that the township's commitment is capped at $58,200 on the $194,000 budget. So it's up to the community groups what scope they want to go to on this, whether they want to include electrical and water and whatever else they want in there. But the dollars are coming from them. So I'm interested to see what those discussions are, where they're going to be. It does make more sense. You can rough it in now and do it later, but in a lot of ways, when you're doing a project, it's better to do it all at once, both financially and benefit of the project. So look forward to the next report on this.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Greg?
I have a question for Diane on the report. So with the original budget being 194, the 30% was 58,200 as a maximum, 30% of the overall project. So with these functioning portions of the project coming in lower, if the committee decides to fundraise more to make up those added services within the next year, would the balance between the 58,200 and the 53,729.10, so the remaining $4,470, would that be able to be kept in a reserve for them to access as an amount that could go towards those additional services? Because I believe the funding allocated for this from the township was 30% of the project to a maximum of 58,200. So as this is coming in under, our funding would be just the 30%. I just want to make sure that if those community groups fundraise that added piece, do they still access that remaining balance even if it is next year?
So the funds would automatically stay in reserves. So then what we would do is bring it back to council in next year's budget with the option of the 30-70 split again, and let council make that decision. And it would come from reserves. So that difference still would come from reserves.
Okay. I think there's, just as a follow-up, I think there's reasons to do it all at once. There's reasons to proceed with what we have. I know that the community and the committee members are very excited about GL Carpentry's proposal to get this in, and that it can't go in without the site prep and the concrete work. But the hydro and the electrical are nice to haves, not the need to haves in terms of the scope of this project. So I'm happy to support this moving forward. I just, if those added pieces come in, when it comes to these collaboratively funded projects, I think just clarity on where the funding is for all of us involved is always helpful. So thank you.
Anyone else? So the total original budgeted amount was 194,000. The township commitment was 30%, which worked out to 58.2. I think we've just had clarification that if, I can't remember what the number is that this would actually spend, but it's less than the 58.2, that'll get carried forward and council will make a decision in the future year. So to me, I think this, I feel like this is done then. It's a project that the residents are happy with. It's under the budgeted amount that council has allocated for it. My understanding is our staff are all, per the report, staff are all good with it. I think we're there. Councilor Mitchell.
I just want to make sure that I'm clarifying here that I fully understand. The budget of 194,000 included electrical and plumbing. So when those are included, whether it's done this year, next year, or 5 years from now, the total project, which we committed 30% to, will be over 194,000. So we're not going to, township's not going to save, like, we're not going to come in at 30%. We're going to come in at the 58,200 because the total project's going to be.
It would be a decision of council. Like at present, we're going to be under the 58.2, correct? Like today, and then it would be a decision of council in the future as to whether we spend the rest of that money or not.
The way I look at it, our commitment was to the project that included electrical and plumbing. It was in in the original report that the motion was passed on, that was included. Now with the updated quotes, that figure is gonna be well over the 194,000. We're capped. But it would have been nice if the whole project came in at 180,000 and we didn't have to, but that's not reality, especially in what's happened in construction costs in the last 2 years. And I think there's a full understanding of who's responsible for the dollars that are over the 194,000. And they've actually, at this point, I believe, raised 200,000, so they're partway there to the overage.
Anyone else? I'm gonna read, Mike?
So just to be clear, we have our quotes in for excavation, concrete, and the building. And I expect there's a little bit of money left in there, and I expect we will use some of that up because there is a hydro pole that's probably going to get moved. There's going to be a little bit of electrical cost in here as well. So it's kind of an unforeseen on what, will that cost us? I don't think it's anything crazy, but I fully expect we're going to use up pretty much everything we got.
I mean, council budgeted 58,200, so. Moved by Finch, seconded by Grigg, that council direct staff to award the contract for constructing the pavilion structure to GL Carpentry for the cost of $120,650. Is there any discussion? Nope. Councilor Finch.
I'd like to just say thank you to every member of this committee and the community groups and staff for taking part in this project. It's exciting to see this project moving forward, and this pavilion is going to be a wonderful addition to Zorra. So thank you for all your time.
Deputy Mayor Grigg.
As the seconder, I know at the last time that we discussed the previous report, we weren't ready to make a decision because we didn't have full clarity on the full scope of the project and all the numbers. This report still has some questions, and Mike is highlighting that there could be some added costs, but I think with the information that we now have, we have a clear picture of exactly what's happening. And I think that this is a great outcome. I know that the 2-week wait on this may have been stressful for members of the community that have a lot of hopes and dreams tied up in this project, but because of this time and this work and this information, I'm ready to support a resolution to award the contract, and can't wait to see this. Hopefully no hiccups in the construction process, and can't wait to see this completed.
Councilor Mitchell.
And I'm going to support the motion as well, primarily because there is a deadline to meet based on the Trillium grant, and we can't afford to dilly-dally any further. We got to get moving on it. And also the numbers, considering what inflation has done the last 2 years, the numbers are reasonable to proceed with it, and it's clear where the extra dollars are going to come from. I'm still not thrilled with the way the process worked out, that we didn't go through our normal bidding process on a $200,000 project. I understand why it turned out that way. A previous staff member did not make it clear to the community groups how the process worked. And then with multiple staff changes since then, kind of fell through the cracks. But I hope this is a one-time situation. I think if we are going to be seen as fair and open business dealers, that we need to get back to the process that's in the policy. But considering the time restrictions, I'm going to support moving forward at this time.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this, if for no other reason than as somebody who stood out there in that trailer in the sun on July 1st, I wouldn't mind at all if opening ceremonies were underneath the roof. So it'll be, I know this will be welcomed, rainy soccer games too, place for somebody to go and get dry for even a few minutes. This is going to be very welcomed by the community. I think it's going to be a great addition for a whole variety of uses, as I think is reflected by the number of groups that have come together to say this is all in all of our interest to have this happen. I think this is a very good thing, and can't thank the residents enough for coming forward to push it and make it happen. I'm going to read it again and call the question. Moved by Finch, seconded by Grigg, that council direct staff to award the contract for constructing the pavilion structure to GL Carpentry for the cost of $120,650. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So, that's a go then, and let her rip. Good luck getting it for July 1st. If it's, well, you know, Gord, I mean, having sat up here, you know we'll always take the money if somebody can find it, right? You know, of course, there's going to be a big crowd of people standing around if it's not done on July 1st, staring at the spot where Pavilion should be, so, you know. Section 9, reports from Corporate and Protective Services Department, nothing from Emergency Services, nothing from Building, Drainage, and Bylaw Services. So 9.3, Financial Services, A, Report 2024-034 from the Director of Finance regarding 2023 Council Remuneration and Expenses. Diane, is there anything you want to highlight for Council in that?
No, I don't have anything else to add.
Questions from Council? Not seeing any. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Finch, that Report 2024-034 from the Director of Finance be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? I just want to point out, in case anybody's watching, I don't know if I've spoken to this other years or not. I publish mine every year, county and township ones. And I just, to me, this is in the same vein. You know, we hear from residents when they get their property tax bill about, you know, does the township ever look for efficiencies and what do people get paid and everything? And I just always think this is pretty amazing. Like, people look at businesses and say municipalities should run like businesses. Well, most businesses do not publish the salaries. Any business that I ever worked for, where I made more than I do here, nobody ever knew how much I got paid. Nobody who ever bought a car that had parts that I made for it knew what I got paid. But everybody knows exactly what we get paid to do their work on their behalf. And I think this is another great example of that, the transparency of municipal government in general. That our residents know exactly what they pay each and every one of us to do the work that we do, and they can decide whether we're worth it or not. So I think that's a good thing. Any other discussion before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 9.3B, Report 2024-032 from the Director of Finance regarding the 2024 development charges. Diane, is there anything you want to highlight in there before I ask Council for questions?
This report comes to Council in a follow-up to the development charges study presentation that was at our last Council meeting, and highlights a few areas within it that will be added to the new study coming forward, any of the proposed changes, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thank you. Questions from Council on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
Diane, the one that jumped out at me was charging DCs on farm bunkhouses for seasonal workers. Do we have an estimate what potential revenue would be to the township for that?
Has been no forecast has been completed on this specific type of development, but historically our permits have been very minimal, and projecting right at this time, we don't see that there'll be any in the near future at this time.
Anyone else? Questions on the report? Moved by Finch, seconded by Grigg, that the changes within Report 2024-032 be included in the draft updated Township Development Charge bylaws. Is there any discussion? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, follow up on my question. The one thing I disagree with on the changes is the charging of development charges for farm bunkhouses. We as a council in the township support agriculture in as many ways as we can, and one of the examples is that we don't charge development charges on farm buildings. This change targets one particular sector of agriculture, that being horticulture, and horticulture is the most labor-intensive sector of the agricultural industry, and for excuse me, for decades, horticultural farmers have had to bring in offshore workers to plant and harvest their crops. So to me, a bunkhouse for a horticultural farm is comparable to a barn for a livestock farm. It's not a luxury, it's part of the production process. Horticulture is not a large percentage in Zorra Township, as Diane said, not expected to bring in much revenue from this. And I would suggest that the potential cost as far as to roads, fire services, and recreation is also insignificant. And I would like to see that change removed from from the changes that were made. I don't think it will have any impact, and it would serve to reinforce our support for all agriculture producers in Zorra Township.
Anyone else? I'm going to read it again and call the question. Moved by Finch, seconded by Gregg, that the changes within Report 2024-032 be included in the draft updated Township Development Charges bylaw. Any other discussion? Councillor Mitchell.
So if we approve that, that means that what I was just talking about will be left in there. There's no chance of it coming out at any point in the process from now on. Okay. So by passing this, we're not locking that in. There's still opportunity to pull it out. Would it be safer to make an amendment then?
Well, I mean, it's up to all. I almost want to sit down and have it. I almost want to sit down and have a chat with Karen and Diane about it, because at other council meetings, I've been of the opinion that when council has made a decision by resolution, that when a bylaw comes forward, all you're doing is voting, does that bylaw reflect what is in fact a previous decision of council, right? And you're not, the approval or the consideration of the bylaw is not another crack at, was that the right decision, but it's in fact just, does this bylaw accurately reflect the intent of the previous decision of council? That would be my view as chair of the meeting, and that if changes were wanted in this, that it would be more appropriate for them to be now. Now, that being said, I haven't had that. Okay, so Karen's saying she agrees, Diane's saying she agrees. If you guys don't like that, you're of course able to challenge the ruling of the chair, but I think that is best practice, I would say.
I don't know if I have a seconder for this, but I would like to make an amendment that charging DCs on farm bunkhouses for seasonal workers be removed from the proposed changes to the township's development charges policy.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Finch.
So, if you can just clarify for me, that council approve removing charging DCs on farm bunkhouses for seasonal workers from the draft updated township development charge bylaw.
Seconder agrees with that? Okay. So the amendment is on the floor, so Councillor Mitchell is the mover of the amendment. Do you wish to speak to the amendment?
Yes, I just gave my reasons why I feel that should be removed. I do want to apologize to staff and to the rest of council for not preparing this beforehand. I wasn't quite aware of what the procedure was on this, but I think it is safer, as we just discussed, to have it in writing going forward.
Councillor Finch is the seconder.
I'm happy to support it.
Deputy Mayor Gregg, you had your hand up before.
I have a question and I don't know who it's for. I'll start with Paul. When we had the development charge presentation last meeting, there were some proposed changes, and then there was sort of like a grid, like what the other municipalities in Oxford County were doing. And that provided, in terms of the industrial development DC charge exemption conversation, it provided some context to what it's intended for, what the recommended changes are, and who's doing what, and then sort of why some of that works or doesn't work. So, well, what you've just said is interesting to me. The challenge that I'm sitting with right now is I'm looking for more information. Am I fully understanding, like, is there more to this than just removing it and then that supports a section of agriculture that this piece is going to negatively impact more than others? I don't know if we have any staff in the room. Like, this feels like it could have been a better conversation last meeting. I don't know if there's any staff in the room that can speak to any fallout impacts of this change or flag anything else for us to consider. It seems minor enough. I like the spirit of it. I'm just feeling ill-prepared to throw support behind it without knowing what else is being done around the county.
This was brought up during our development studies committee, and it was consideration was part of the recommendations within the study, and it's based on that all the other municipalities would be following the same structure of exemptions and getting everyone be aligned the same. So this was one municipality that was concerned about bunk houses for seasonal workers and wanted to see DCs being charged on them. So all the other municipalities followed suit to try and make sure that we're all lining together. But this is always open for discussion for council, and if their recommendation is not to have it as part of the to remove the exemption on bunkhouses, it's more than happy to go through, and we can do it as a council and change our bylaw. So we would just be different within that, whereas all the other areas may take that exemption off. Does that help? Okay.
Councillor Mitchell.
Follow up on what Diane said. I believe there is benefit to having everybody treated equally. I think the big change in the report was that we would be start removing the exemptions on industrial properties. To me, this is not an industrial property. This is an agricultural property, and it should be treated as all other agricultural properties. I think the reason it comes to us at this level is it so that we can fine-tune it for our own needs. Since horticulture, I can understand why some municipalities who have huge horticultural industries would both get benefit from it, but also they have extra cost in their infrastructure because they have so many offshore workers. I think given the Zorra Township's insignificant revenue and insignificant cost associated with it, it's just something that we don't need to do.
Anyone else? Yeah, I'm tempted to vote against the amendment just because I feel like I'm lacking the bigger context of, you know, what are the consequences of this. But at the same time, I think you made good points about, you know, how does this compare to a barn? Like, I mean, if it's an agricultural building, it's an agricultural building. Not all agricultural buildings are the same, but I think, really, I think, you know, based on the question earlier, there isn't, the answer to the question earlier, there isn't going to be a significant impact here. I think it's probably the right thing to do overall. Maybe I'll regret that, but I think it's probably the right thing to do. So, anybody else before I'm going to get Karen to read the amendment, and then I will call the question on the amendment alone. Any other comments before I do that? Okay, Karen.
That council approve removing charging DCs on farm bunkhouses for seasonal workers from the draft updated township development charge bylaw.
All those in favor of the amendment? That is carried. And now the amended motion that we have is moved by Finch, seconded by Gregg, that the changes within report 2024-032 be included in the draft updated township development charge bylaws, and
That, that council approve removing charging DCs on farm bunkhouses for seasonal workers from the draft updated township development charge bylaw.
Any further discussion on the amended motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. All right. And Legislative Services Report 2024-033 from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding lease of township lands to Quadro Communications. Who's going to take that one? Don? Yeah. I'll go straight to questions from council, and we'll see where we go from there. Questions from council on the report? None. All right. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Finch, that council approve the site location as specified in report 2024-033, and that council direct staff to include service levels and timelines in the lease negotiations with Quadro. Deputy Mayor Grigg, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, please. So this location seems great. I agree with staff assessment on it. When there was a similar situation in Thamesford, there was sort of some more variety that was put forward and some challenges with some of them, and then where they ended up setting up shop. The only question I had, I mean, we know that access to reliable internet is something that is not consistent across Zorra and is a vital service that is needed. So while this implies a benefit to the residents of the Embro area, I like the part of this motion of, stipulating what the timelines and the service levels will be, so that as we provide this opportunity for Quadro, that Quadro is able to clarify the benefit that our residents can expect.
Any other questions for staff on the report? No, I didn't. Or did I? I did, yeah. Sorry, I did, sorry. That's on me. Anybody else wish to speak to the report? To the motion on the floor? Not seeing any. I'm going to read it again and call the question. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Finch, that council approve of the site location as specified in report 2024-033, and that council direct staff to include service levels and timelines in the lease negotiations with Quadro. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And correspondence requiring direction 10A. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Finch, that correspondence from Oxford County Pride be received and filed, and that the community grant program info be sent to Oxford County Pride for submissions for sponsorship fund requests. Deputy Mayor Grigg, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
First, I just have a question for staff. So,
Go ahead.
So my question is, with the correspondence we received and the flag policy that we now have in place, does that correspondence trigger the ability for staff to raise the pride flag as requested by Oxford County Pride?
It does.
Okay, great.
Anyone else? Councillor Mitchell.
Clarification, we're not voting on whether we're going to raise the pride flag. We're just receiving their request as information. Because our policy's been modified.
Correct.
Okay, so it's not a vote, like last year at this time, we voted whether we would raise the flag or not. We're not voting on that this time. We're just voting that we've received the information.
Correct. The motion is that correspondence from Oxford County Pride be received and filed, and that the community grant program info be sent to Oxford County Pride for submissions for sponsorship fund requests. Existing township policy as of almost exactly a year is that the township flies the pride flag in June. Deputy Mayor Grigg.
And then just to speak to the motion, yeah, it was a different process last year because the policy did not permit it, so that there was the ask for us to consider. So I wanted to clarify with staff that policy now reflects this action. And then also, we get requests for funding. The second piece of the correspondence was for some sponsorship funding, and we get requests from a variety of community groups who do great work in the community. One thing that I always think of in relation to Oxford County Pride is they, on a volunteer basis, they do a lot of work that enhances the spirit of our community safety and well-being plan, helping us create welcome and safe communities for everybody. And I know that community safety and well-being plan is something that we're not providing funding to at this point, and so there's some great opportunity through volunteer work to leverage some of indirectly those initiatives that support that plan through sponsorship. But we do have a community grant program, and so what the second piece of the motion is to make sure that staff are sending that program information to Oxford County Pride so that they're able to engage with that process to request some funds that way.
Anyone else? Councillor Mitchell.
When we send that information, should we also inform Oxford Pride that we have changed our policy and it's no longer necessary to send us this every year? Just one last item.
I think we can do that. I don't think we need an amendment in that case. I think staff have heard that it's existed. It's just communicating
Yeah, it's
existing
just
policies.
One
so-
last thing for them
Yep.
to do, one
Absolutely.
last thing for us to consider if
Absolutely.
the policy's already in place.
I'm always a big fan of council getting out of the way and just letting the work happen. Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. No reports from boards and committees. Information items. I have a motion here to receive and file 12A and B. Does anybody want to do anything different than that with either of those? Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Grigg, that items 12A and B be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And no unfinished business, no notices of motion. Bylaws. Moved. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that bylaw 04-24 be taken as read a third time and finally passed, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And moved by Mitchell, seconded by Grigg, that bylaws 15-24 and 17-24 be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And items of community interest in the calendar. Councillor Finch.
Thistle Theatre has the Miss Super Test, the Bob Hayward story, on right now until March 24th. 7 p.m. shows and 2 p.m. shows are happening, and Councillor Grigg and I will be at this Saturday's production. The Embro Pharmacy is running an Easter coloring contest. You can pick up the drawings at the pharmacy, and they are to be delivered back by March 23rd. March 30th, Embro Easter egg hunt at the Embro Pond, 10 a.m. And there's also a coloring contest with that you can pick up at the Embro Market in Embro. Through March and April, the 4-H is doing their pancake breakfasts, Saturday and Sunday, so remember to support that. The Embro Legion has a brunch again on April 7th, 9 to 12:30. And the Thistle Theatre opens registration for Dramarama Saturday, March 23rd, and it fills up fast for the weeks of July 2nd through 12th and 15th to 26th.
Anyone else? Councillor Mitchell.
Tomorrow evening, Thursday, March 21st, 7 p.m. in Embro is the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority Landowners Workshop. On Saturday, at Harrington Knox Church is Super Talent Soup Making and Tasting Fundraiser, Saturday, March 23rd from 12 to 2. And there's an Upper Thames Board meeting next Tuesday, March 26th.
I didn't hear anything about that soup thing anywhere. 12 to 2, you said?
It was on Brown's Corners newsletter, so it has to be gospel.
Wow, okay. Anything else? What was it? Okay.
Temps for Business Association is meeting on Wednesday, the 27th.
What time and where?
7 p.m. at Tempsford Accounting. I will be attending, provided I'm getting a root canal earlier in the day, so I'm hoping to attend. But if not, it'd be great if you were there.
I made a note there. I'll look into that. Thank you. Anything else on the calendar? Councillor Finch?
I should also add that the Zorra summer camps registration is opening too, right? And the Embro Fair is looking for new committee members for the Home Craft Committee, so anyone out there wanting to join that?
Anything else on the calendar? Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Grigg, that bylaw 18-24, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held March 20th, 2024, be read a first, second, and third time this March 20th, 2024, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that this session of council be now adjourned and herewith closed at 7:21 p.m. and the next meeting of council be called for the April 3rd, 2024 at 9:30 a.m. in the council chambers of the Township Municipal Office. Is there any discussion?